So I'd like to say welcome to Anatolii. Welcome, Anatolii. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Hello, Craig. Thank you.
It's nice to have you here today. We met. I don't know when the first time we met, but I think you reached out on LinkedIn. It could have been email or some other platform. Was it LinkedIn where you reached out?
Yeah, I've been a few times almost incognito on your events. And then we've reconnected this year online, and then we kind of kept growing from there.
Fantastic. And I know we've had some conversations, you and I, with Will Greenblatt, who's of Out Loud Speaker School, and I know your pitch is going strong, and I also know you guys are in Founders Institute. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of that. But first, let's talk about Pact, the agreement platform. What is it?
Yeah. So in essence, Pact is an agreement platform, just as you said. It is a tool for small, medium-sized entrepreneurs, founders, key decision makers who enter into agreements frequently to host their agreement process on some kind of a platform. By saying that, it's a combination of a chat app with a set of tools which make it efficient, legally powerful, and it just saves a lot of time. So my goal here is to change the way you guys think about agreements and both simplify it without compromising the legal security. Yeah, so if we go into more details, we have interesting tools like digital ID, we have e-signatures in chat, and we'll be keep introducing and throwing in things to support you from negotiation to formalizing your conversations into some kind of an agreement, signature, then potential integrations with payment processing like PayPal or larger value transfers, and then up to all the way to managing your post-contractual relationships. Because what's important to keep in mind about agreements is that it's not about the contract itself. It's about building up trust beforehand. It's about then managing your relationships afterwards, after you sign it. And you have to have a space to have all of that stored, because all of that has legal and financial implications later on in your journey.
So let me ask you some questions completely off the book here that we did not discuss, and a lot of these questions will be ones we didn't discuss. But a lot of companies, I used to work for Deloitte and Touche and Mercer Human Resource Consulting, and a lot of times email and client emails were the subject of lawsuits and investigations. And the companies moved away from backing up email systems for a while because they only kept 30 days so that, people couldn't do deep dives into history. And a lot of people moved to chats that they didn't save. Now, where does this kind of platform come into that when, at least I'm going to say 20 years ago, platforms were moving away from backing up their email because they didn't want their client discussions to be brought back in court, to now where we want these kind of discussions to make it easier and make them legal binding?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it depends on the industry. So first of all, there are industries that are obliged to store their records for X amount of years, like financial industries, right? 5 or 7 years based on their compliance rules. Um, what we're trying to do is we're bringing a little bit of trust back into the communication, right? So how all of the relationships progressed from like the good old handshake, the good old spit in your hand, shake it, to like the more digitized version of things now. And with this digitalization and with COVID and how everything evolves, it's not the best experience. And having those on hand, being able to retrieve your records back, provides more clarity into the relationship for both parties. So by architecture, we're trying to eliminate the necessity of someone kind of deleting it and hiding it away. So that's our intention and goal, to bring that trust back. That being said, there's a lot of tools that businesses use right now. Let's say the Gmail itself, right? The nature of the email is that if you send it out to someone, the other party has it, right? So even if you delete it on your servers, the other party has a proof of that. And we're taking that proof of communication next level. So where like there's a third party that you can always cross-reference and see, like the court can see that, here are the messages, here are the contracts, and there's a hash sent to a public blockchain. You cannot alter it, you cannot change it. And that's where we're getting, and that's where we're heading. And for those larger auditors and the big four and like other companies, I think they as consultants are the ones that are most interested in helping their customers have a clear pattern of their relationships, right? If the intentions are true and trustworthy and open, to then be able to prove something else later on their journey in an easier and a faster way.
I think that's great. I think what you're doing and the platform itself simplifies a lot of things. Speaking of regulatory bodies that we mentioned earlier on, I think before we started, um, what legal changes are going on? I've seen some stuff. I don't want to mention other companies, but I've seen some petitions going around and some changes around, digitally, legally being able to sign documents. So things are moving suddenly moving away from fax machines potentially to digital signed signatures, things that the industry hadn't moved ahead for 30, 40 years, and now because of people can't get together for signatures to do these things, we're moving leaps ahead. How does that affect your platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's just mind blowing how you would think like okay, digital signatures, everyone should be using them these days. It's funny, but not. Like people still use their scanners. They still use the good old pencil or pen or sign it on top and then scan it back and shoot it via email. Um, that's changing. That's changing. So that's like how most of the businesses operate, the smaller, medium-sized ones. That's how they operate right now. It's transforming to the digital signature route. And in North America specifically, the e-signature process is simpler than in the rest of the world. We don't have specific keys issued by governments that would identify that it's your signature like they have in Europe. Good examples, Belgium, Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken, Netherlands. They have those, Estonia and like some of Baltic countries. They have the process of matching your identity with your signature, and thus the Ministry of Justice or something comparable body issues your unique key that kind of is your digital signature. And that's a really complex route, but it allows you more flexibility in government to citizen relationships, government to business relationships, and then business to business relationships. Here it's kind of a bit lax, I would say, right? And you could just do the hand-drawn thingy in the box, and it would be more or less enforceable. Uh, and it has its own goods and bads, right? So there are cons. Like it's flexible, it's easy, it's quick, and then there's some a little like space for manipulation and like issues as well. With the so COVID is good and bad for the legal industry overall. So it forced a lot of court appearances and a lot of court procedures moving to Zoom, like we are chatting right now with you. That was unimaginable. Last year, if I would pitch this, they would say, it's crazy, you need 10 years and $10 million to implement this. Now it's like you need a week and then you have $10,000. Okay, go and figure it out, right? So that's how it's changing. So hopefully the whole legal tech environment and the legal tech space, it accelerated, at least I would say, a few years ahead. It's a good and positive change overall for the societies, because if legal is moving ahead, then other businesses that surround it are able to enter into deals in the digital world faster, and then it speeds up the whole economy overall.
Yeah, I think I've seen some petitions around, digital signing of wills that legally hasn't happened before and that kind of stuff. So it's nice to see the whole industry moving forward.
There's a funny example. Like there's like a service called Notarized Me or something like that. They're very big, and their sole kind of purpose is that you jump into a video chat, and then a certified notary jumps into the video chat as well to certify something. I'm like, how weird is that? Right? You know what I mean? Like you could have it automated. You could have it. You could have the person identified somehow, and then maybe the whole sub area of notarization might, well, not whole, but maybe like 50% of it might get automated somehow. And that's I feel that's then the number one industry that would get replaced or digitized, or something would happen in it, and we'll see it in our lifetime for sure.
Absolutely. Finding a notary sometime was a pain in the butt, and it's always a good recommendation to one of those people in your circle of friends. There's, you always need to have a good lawyer, maybe a good doctor. It's a good idea to have one of those as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, so I like to. I know we've talked about this a bit, but we got into your pact a little bit, and we're going to get back to it. But I like to talk about what the entrepreneur was like growing up, and I feel like I'm pretty old talking to you, and maybe you're still growing up, but don't take that the wrong way. Um, what were you like growing up? Were you studious? Were you into music, into sports? Were you a handful for your parents, sneaking out at night? What were what were you like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, although I'm young, I do have a very interesting life journey up to this moment. So I think I would share a little bit of that. I was a crazy kid when I was like 3 to 7, I'd say. So I was just like a pain in the ass, constantly running around, super energetic. I don't know how my parents kind of coped with that, but here I am. We've been traveling a little bit around the world. So I had a luxury of living in China and South Korea, based on the nature of my dad's work. And I was able to kind of get a view on all of the cultures, more or less, except like the African culture. So I lived a little bit in the East, I lived in Europe, and then now I'm living in North America. So very interesting. It evolved my communication skills. It evolved me. You're just like, you're dropped in an environment, and how you just go and figure out how you make friends, how you establish connections. I feel that was a great experience for me personally. So it enabled me to build up all of these contacts afterwards here, and then when I was in Ukraine. So most of my lifetime, I've lived in Kiev, in Ukraine. I've studied in the International Relationships Lyceum, so I was a little bit in the diplomacy. I've been modeling United Nations activities and the European Youth Parliament, up to a point where I became like a best delegate. I was sent to Geneva, participated in a real universal periodic review for Ukraine, then got back, became the Secretary General of the model. And then my whole kind of entrepreneurial journey started from there. That was like my first year in university. And then I finished up with all these international relationships because I've read a lot of books, and my dad influenced my journey a lot by introducing the right reading material, and it sparked the right thinking processes for the future, just like the whole concept of it. And I started my first business around there, while studying at two universities. Just before the revolution started and the war started, and like the currency fell like 3 times, and it was an import dependent business. So I had an on-demand iPhone repair service, which was also like a startup. So my repair guys were visiting customers and fixing the phones right in front of them. Similar concept to Fix. You had a talk with the Fix guy here on the podcast. In our case, it's iPhones, and people fixing the devices and gadgets. And that started in a funny way. So I've heard of iCracked in US.
Yep.
And basically I've dropped them a note saying, hey guys, let's open it up in Ukraine. They're like, like, are you kidding me, boy? So okay, I'll open my own. Okay. Wasn't the best decision because it's a super tough business, but I managed to figure it out. In like 3 years closer to graduation, I had hundreds of customers. It was profitable. I didn't take any money from my parents. It was a fun experience. Yeah.
And so now you're over here. Why did you come to Canada?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I want to use this like airspace, right? Just to resonate a little bit and just to throw out a few thoughts. So I think that well, first of all, when I was like around 21, I made a plan for like the next 100 years for myself, what I want to do, what I want to change, and it's very ambitious, funny. But then I just have this feeling that I need to contribute, to the civilization as a whole. Kind of, we have a lot of problems all around the planet. There's just a bunch of shit happening, and people make it overly complicated. And I think there's like here in Canada, it's a really good model of how people tend to live together. There's a certain set of rules, and everyone is okay. Everyone has living, everyone has food, they're happy, they're walking around, and I think that should be adopted more and more around the globe. And my vision is that I want to understand better how all of this was created. Is this a simulation? What it is, like the more philosophical kind of note there. And to achieve that, there's a bunch of steps that you have to do before you get to that understanding. And as part of that, like we have to unite, we have to be like this bee colony kind of principle where we all are, you know, centralized and we have a sense. I feel that now we lack a lot of senses, and like we don't feel what should we do. Like with COVID, it gets even worse, like all of those psychological and mental issues arise because just people feel like lost and just like thrown there. But I think we don't have to be this discouraged, and we have to focus on something really important, and then that's exploring, you know, in a mutually beneficial way, creating some value without, and like being inclusive, that so that everyone is kind of participating, and it's spreading across the globe evenly. And then you would achieve that synergy when you have this small funny globe flying in the middle of nowhere. You like, we don't know what we are, where we are. Yeah, and that's why, kind of looping back to the question, I'm here because it's a necessary step to then keep, you know, keep stuff moving. I have a plan maybe to also visit MIT at a certain point of time later on in my life. So Canada is a great platform to, you know, establish a longer term living for myself.
Well, I appreciate you being here and being part of our community. I'm lucky enough to have been born here in Toronto, what we used to be called East York. Now I think it's just Toronto, and it's we've seen a lot of changes. But one thing I like is that we're so diverse, especially here in Toronto. I can't speak to all over the country, but you've come out to our events. I have people come in first day, first hour, first week in the country, and we're it's just the way it goes, and it's wonderful. I've had one of the person used to be Ella, used to be on our leadership team. He's gone on. He works for another accelerator. One of the launch pads. I can't remember which one. But he came in from Syria, and he was like the first week he came into our stuff and started coming out and became a volunteer and joined our leadership team. And as he was doing a bunch of other stuff, it's great. I think the more exposure we have to what's real world, what's happening out there, different cultures, different experiences, the more we can change the world and do better. Like if I just look at down my street, yeah, sure, I can change, the cracks in the pavement or the potholes. But if you expand your view, all of a sudden, the impact you can have and the things you can change become significantly different.
I agree with that. Yeah, it's the more variables you have in the formula, the more options you have, the better understanding you have of the landscape around, and it just filters out the nonsensical kind of the weird arguments in favor of the reality and what's happening around.
Yeah, hopefully we're going through a shift, and on the other end, we'll be as a world and as a human species in a better place.
I agree with that. I think that shocks are necessary for any system. It helps you navigate through your processes, right? It makes it more resilient. And it's like the back to Nassim Taleb and like the anti-fragility concept that we as societies and countries and civilization become more anti-fragile, right? So there's a point to it where it becomes this total disaster, right? So hopefully we wouldn't reach that point, and that's only could happen by cooperation and co-participation in the processes. So let's say, for example, as the unfortunate events that happened in Beirut, right, in Lebanon recently, the world took a stance. They're trying to support, trying to help, right? And there's protests right now in the streets, and it's just bad, right? So it's the situation gets worse and worse, and that explosion was just like a last drop, right? So I think that the good way would be for the hot heads to get cooler, right? The world is still supporting the processes inside, and then everything should be solved in a peaceful and in a normal way, because as we see with the Ukrainian example, there's both good and bad after you have post kind of revolutionary processes. You have a lot of time to build up, and it typically everything still kind of falls even deeper. So you think you're at the bottom, but no, you kind of keep falling from there. Yeah, the same analogy with the COVID, and with everything that happens right now, we'd have to figure out ways to reintegrate everything back into this global system, because we have reverse tendencies or reverse pathways right now, that like everyone is becoming like more isolated, like they're small islands of countries, right? And that's not necessarily with the global, like that's not very good for the economies. That's not very good for the cultural exchange. I miss traveling as well. So we have to. It's upon us, like, right. So for example, I have these thoughts constantly that uh, I'm here in Canada right now, right? We're able to here stream and discuss these interesting and kind of complex topics, and we're amongst the most educated people in the world, and then we have something to eat, which means that we're as well amongst the most wealthy people in the world, like the top 5, top 10%. And if not us, who would do the change? Like the people who are like fighting for food? No, like it's like that this push has to come from the more wealthier, more developed countries into the rest of the world, right? That push for change and development.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I don't want to go too far down this chain because we could talk for hours. I think the problem becomes is when you let the people who are giving the money start controlling the situation, it becomes a problem. I worked in Mexico for a while, and I was there when the peso devaluated a third. And when you let the factories who are injecting the money into the economy dictate the wages or dictate the working conditions, or then you've got a it doesn't help. So you have to remove somehow where you're actually helping the environment and helping the people in there rather than helping corporate interests or interests of a foreign power.
That's right. Yeah, and I have a lot of comments on that, but I think we'd have to try like do another talk, or like make it like a philosophical, round table, like a mastermind with whiskey and cigars, and just like discuss all of the like
I
the how capitalism is broken and what's needed to be changed and fixed there, because it's still kind of the better system out of all of those, right? But with a lot of changes to be introduced.
Absolutely, I think that would be a great topic, and we should take a look at it because what is the next step forward for civilization? You know, is it a hybrid capitalist socialist society? Is it something else? We hear a lot about um, universal basic income, and
Hmm.
I'm not a big fan of universal basic income because it's not quite right, and I don't know, and I'll explain that people need to feel value. They need to feel valued. They need to feel part of something, like they're creating something. So how do you motivate them? I don't care. I don't. If you want to, it's creating music, have poetry, painting, working, doing your own company. It doesn't matter, but it's not sitting at home playing Xbox and watching Netflix for weeks on end. And it's because that just leads to depression and leads to not feeling self worth, and it's a spiral of getting. That's a problem. So, combination of how do you feel good about yourself and find something you love and passionate about, and have some sort of UBI. I'm all for some combination of that.
Hmm.
If that
Hmm.
makes sense. I just I don't think we're there yet, and we have to figure it out. And we as a human species can't think that we've evolved all the way. There's more to come, and we have to kind of figure out what next steps as we grow and overpopulate the world and do all these other things that are causing all these problems. So you're a co-founder of Pact. Finding the right co-founders and the key first team members can be crucial. Can you tell me how you met your co-founders? And was it outside the normal hiring process? And what led you to the conclusion that this is someone I want to work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's no normal into finding co-founders, I think, right? In the end of the
Yeah.
day. So it's definitely outside of the normal HR process. And I would highly discourage people from finding co-founders on an HR kind of basis, because then you're almost finding yourself an employee, and then your kind of whole relationship kind of goes from there. but they're different. Yeah, it's not a rule, but I found my legal co-founder William at one of the legal tech hackathons here in Toronto. So I was quite active in different tech events and hackathons especially, and we were lucky to be part of the same team. We've built up this relationship. We had another legal tech product in our mind to push on, and then we've kind of paused it because at that point of time we thought that that will be a hard sell. And from there, our whole ideation and we participated in a few other legal tech events, and then our whole ideation process started with like a variety of thoughts and like options and everything. We've crystallized it to one, and then from there our journey started, and we've crystallized this idea of having a chat for business. So basically, the focus before was on mostly on the communication essence, that there's no chat where you could chat with external parties and it would have the legal power that you need to, say approve stuff or like get approvals from your customers. You could use WhatsApp, but messages can be deleted. So it's not meant for business communication at all. There's Slack, but they're built around internal communication. There's Skype, but it's not very a business kind of tool yet. Skype for Business is used only internally in large corporations for their internal messaging. So the idea here is that there was no chat for business when we were thinking about it. And then from there, it evolved. I've onboarded my third co-founder. So he is Svetoslav. He was my classmate back from school. And luckily he had a lot of startup experience in the meantime, so he participated in various tech roles as a product owner, as a CTO, as a project manager, tried running his own outsourcing company. So he had like great tech experience and procedural and operational, and that's how our like kind of legendary team formed. So now we're a team of 3 founders, and that's how it all crystallized.
That's every founder story or co-founder story is different, so it's interesting to hear how it works. Like a lot of people coming to me is, where can I find a co-founder? And I always hesitate because going to say a co-founder event or co-founder speed dating. Well, here's the problem: is that other person, he's looking for a co-founder too, but for his idea or her idea.
Exactly.
So now you're competing. Why won't you work on my idea rather than finding someone you can work with, or finding someone who's in love with your idea as much as you are that you can work with? So there's other ways of going about it than just kind of going head on, say, I need a co-founder. It's, well, what do you really need in your organization? And then start going there. Go to TechDO, go to TorontoStarts, go to hackathons are a great place depending on what you're looking for. If you're looking for marketing people, go to marketing events. If you're
Yeah.
looking for tech people, go to tech events, right?
I would almost invert the process from like trying to hire someone and sell your thing than just showing the picture and let the picture kind of sell it on its own. And that's easier to say than to do, I understand. But like the idea is that, yes, you participate in all these great events and platforms that you mentioned. Yes, hackathons are a great source. Maybe you don't force your idea on top at the hackathon. You work with people, you see how the dynamics flow, how people behave in that short time frame, and you kind of get a glimpse of like, what the person they are and how capable the person is. Afterwards, you start building the midterm relationship, and only then you kind of convert. So it's just like a multi-step. It's just like selling. It's like a multi-step process where you build up the relationship, you see how like you align or not, and then you kind of convert there, proposing like the other person to become your co-founder. And it is definitely almost like marrying. There are people online who are saying that you're looking up co-founders, that you should be ready to kind of mentally marry them. And that's right, because you'll get through a lot of shit together, and the storms would be all around, and you have to manage and you have to stay resilient. And I don't like this whole trend with the startup is like super rapidly, you have to super quickly, whatever, just scales, scrum, doom, doom, doom. I like having a mindset that it's more of a marathon, because in the end of the day, it is a marathon, right? If you're ideating for a year and then you're kind of validating and building up the first steps in a year, and then you scale in like year or like half a year cycles. It's still, the whole thing is you're running through it yourself and with your co-founders. So you have to be resilient and endurant to last. And yeah, and then the other side of it is you post it all around, you do fancy YouTube videos, you post it on Quora, you get feedback, and from the people that provide you some good feedback, you'd be able to find some interesting folks to try invite them as your co-founder as well.
Yeah, and this is I like to say, and though everybody says things differently, I like to say there's two types of founders. There's the builders and there's the sellers. So the builders kind of build something and show it to people and convince people that they've got something. And the sellers, walk around talking about their idea until they can sell it to somebody who will build it for them. It's kind of, that's kind of the way it works. And I've got a question here from the chat room. How do you determine if you really need a co-founder as opposed to hiring the skills you need? Now, you're close to graduating Founders Institute. You work with a bunch of different startups, and you have your own experience. How would you answer this?
Yeah, it depends on the journey you're trying to embark on, and the project itself, and the expertise you need. If it's something simple, relatively straightforward, and you could do your first iteration of your product as like a concierge service, offering it manually yourself to test and validate the whole thing, you don't need a co-founder at that stage. If it's something deep tech or technical or medical, and you're not an expertise kind of guru in that area, then you definitely need a co-founder, because no one would trust you that you're able to solve it. Also, it depends on your mindset. I'm honestly, to be honest, I'm more of like an individualist myself, and I like running everything. So I had to do this mental shift for like, the more people you have, the easier it is to cover specific areas. And so they're both goods and bads in having like a few co-founders and being on your own. In the end of the day, it rolls up to your experience and your ability to manage teams and your ability to manage projects. So if you're able to hire everyone, structure the processes in a way that it will develop, you don't need a co-founder. You could do it on your own, like Bezos, right? For example, he didn't have any co-founders, or did he? I think he was alone, right? In the
I,
first.
be- I believe he was alone.
Yeah, so here you go. Like, he built his website, he paid someone, like the technical guys, then iterations, and you formed your processes, and it works all right. That would be the short answer.
Yeah, it really depends. It depends. If you can get something started and get it going and start making income by yourself, that's what I honestly believe you should do, because then you'll really understand where your gaps are. And then once you understand that, that's when you start looking for partners or hires or whatnot to start accelerating that and to fix those things. And that might be a co-founder, but it takes a little bit of work. And, hiring a co-founder kind of situation, like you said a little earlier, is it needs to be a relationship. You should be going into something and building a relationship over time, and then deciding whether this is someone you can spend 12 hours a day with for the next 10 years of your life.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's kind of that. So who would you say is your ideal client?
Um, in our case, uh, I like to name them frequent deal makers. So those are the individuals or businesses or like units inside of the businesses that enter into contracts, that enter into agreements on a frequent basis, more than like 5 to 10 times a month. And their average contracts and the values of what they're agreeing upon is more than $500 to $1,000 per contract. So it's an interesting how, like, like in the startup world, people like categorizing that, okay, which industry and which specific user your solution kind of covers. And it works a little bit different for legal tech products, because the legal industry serves all other industries, and it kind of solves the problem based on the need of the specific business user, right? So you need a contract. Okay, we can draft a contract for an exporter. We can draft a contract for an IT development shop. That's the mindset that lots of law firms and legal tech projects have. Not to misinterpret it with like the go-to-market strategy and understand who is like a better earlier adopter. So in our case, we believe that we have to target businesses that serve other businesses. By doing that, we'd be able to launch this acquisition spiral and be able to get this kind of network effect going. So in our case, we want to focus on someone who is tech savvy enough to be using chat apps and like this kind of semi-automation thing, which is really relatively simple, easy to use, all in one. You don't have to code a lot, but still. And we're focusing on IT service providers, small and medium-sized IT service providers. And those are the folks and the shops and the studios and the agencies who develop websites, applications, games, VR, AR experiences, design studios, someone who is working on a project basis with milestones, NDAs, IP right transfers, back and forth communication pertaining to the contract, payment cycles, and so on. And we feel that we'll be able to offer the most value for them as a first step, and then we'll scale to other frequent deal makers from there. So we'd also explore the enterprise route where larger corporations would be able to speed up their average agreement cycles. They have 100 people working on contracts. And if you could optimize that by 20%, you so much increase the bottom line in the end of the year. So that's our area of focus for future.
So I like to try and share both successes and failures. Earlier you had mentioned a product or project you'd shelved because it wasn't ready for it or wasn't practical or you couldn't see the business model working. Can you tell us a time where you screwed up and made the wrong pivot or startup decision and what happened?
I wouldn't say it's a big failure, but I just didn't have that much of startup experience to fail enough, I would say. So, thankfully my previous interactions and my business affairs were successful. So I kind of avoided, and those were like minor mistakes. Overall, there was one positioning failure that I could kind of attribute to myself, which was naming our solution a chat for business. So when I was pitching it as a chat for business, people were constantly asking questions. How are you different from, and then naming the name of any other chat they used beforehand. And after focusing more on that problem itself and on the positioning as a process, and then thankfully one of our mentors advised me to buy April Dunford's book, Obviously Awesome, on positioning. And after reading that and kind of crystallizing it all together, I've reiterated Paqt to be the agreement platform, which now makes much more sense, and it's easily digestible for people, and they get the principle and they stop asking weird questions. So that was like the problem, the failure, right? It lasted for a bit, and then I got annoyed with it up to a point where I said, okay, we have to somehow solve this. This is like, we're totally not doing this and people don't get it. So how do we convey that we do this? And when you're building a new market category, it's really tough because you have to come up with your verbiage. Like you have to name it. Like what is it? Like it's in fruit. What it looks like? It looks like an apple maybe, but it's not an apple. Well, how do you name it? So yeah, all of those funny, interesting problems arise, and we've successfully kind of navigated through it.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a test I used during one of our idea validations where you hold up your slogan for 3 seconds and you put it down and then you ask people to, what do you do? And yeah, exactly. And it's funny that people, if you can't pitch your idea in 30 seconds, no one's going to buy it. And I'm sorry, people tell me different things all the time. I've had startups through my accelerator who start at a 12-minute pitch. People don't understand it unless, they spend a full 12 minutes. Well, no one's going to buy this because by the end of the end of the second minute, people have stopped paying attention. We have the attention span of a goldfish. You have to hook them. They have to understand it so they can engage with you. If it takes 12 minutes for them to understand, they're lost.
There's this interesting principle that arose when I was chatting with my dad, and it's called the what do they say kind of principle. So if I tell you about a product, right, like I'm trying to sell you the product, you like it, for example, then you digest it, you reformulate it in your own words, and you share it with your friends. So, and that way of how you share it with your friends, that's like what you actually do. So like I could for example, Slack. Yeah, it's a communication in cloud, chatting, whatever. A lot of complex attributes, features, benefits, and then you're just like, okay, it's a chat for Teams, or like it's an internal chat, and that combination of like 2, 3, 4, 5 words up to 10 words, it's essential. It's like how people understood what you do, and then how they share what you do to others. That's really important to grasp and to have in mind. That said, so I truly believe in that. And then, yes, if you don't kind of narrow that down and you're not able to explain it very narrowly, um, unlikely you would sell. But you have to keep in mind that you have to apply the customer audience. You have to apply your target audience to whom you're pitching it. So that's why I hate kind of these like 30-second, 1-minute pitch events a little bit, because typically it's not your customer audience. And if you do it the right way, how it would resonate and just detonate, and the heads of your potential customers would explode with joy. The typical setting for the pitch events wouldn't understand that, because you never know who's there and who is like your target or not. So you might not get a bunch of applause, but you're still kind of doing the right thing. So you have to keep that in mind. And that's why I don't like, putting these structures. They're structured, okay, in the 1-minute pitch, you have to do this, that, this, that, this, that. So when you meet the investor, you do this, that, this, that, this, that, and they maybe are interested with you. It's not how it works. Like if you do that, like all of the investors will think that you're weird and you're just another newbie startupper who is trying to build up a relationship. It's better to do some kind of like a random talk, build up interests, common areas, something interesting, and only then share that one-liner, and then like, yeah, okay, let's connect on LinkedIn or something like that. Does that make sense?
It does, and you never have one pitch. You have dozens, and you should. This is a problem. People don't, who are you pitching to? I get a pitch deck all the time, and I'm looking at it, and I say, who the heck is this for? Who the heck is this pitch deck for? I might have asked you at that one point, but I didn't say who the heck. Is this for investors? Is this for sellers? Is this for customers? Is this for partners? All of these are different pitches. So when you go to a pitch competition, you're only getting one. And it's for whatever that desired, whatever that person is pitching for. It's for the competition win or whatever that happens to be there that night. For Startup Drinks, people come out and they just pitch to get feedback. Sometimes they're pitching for a co-founder. Sometimes they're pitching for investment or practicing. So, but they're all kind of different. So you really need to understand that and understand who you're talking to. It's funny, and I'll share this. So I run an incubator program called Startup Launch, and one of our classes, we were feeling pretty confident. They'd done pretty good, and I make them pitch all the time. We do. You've been to our events, so I brought in an improv person, and we practice improv. We did a couple classes. And then we went out. I said, all right, here we are. We're going to go out on a Saturday night. We're going to go to random bars. And, you've got to pitch people your startup.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It was a complete disaster. I got to tell you. I had someone leave the program immediately after that. Like it was a complete disaster. So I'm going to be totally honest with everybody here. But people weren't ready. Like they would literally walk up to someone in the bar and look at them or look at their feet and start talking about their startup. And I'm like, the whole point of this exercise is understanding your environment. You understand who you're talking to. This isn't an investor. This is someone who's randomly on the street at a bar drinking. How do you start that conversation, and then how do you get it to your startup? You just don't. It was a complete disaster. So definitely need more training in that. But it's all only reason around that story is understanding who you're pitching to, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And understanding who the audience is, and sometimes they just don't care, and that's okay. But if you understand that this person on the other end is not your target audience or don't care, you can still get your value prop across fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
help accountants to do this. Oh, great, or whatever it is. And simple is hard. Like people don't understand getting to the agreement platform probably took you a lot longer than just a couple of pitches. You got to pitch a whole bunch of times, and getting simple is hard. And I thought it was Hemingway who said, if I had more time, I'd write a shorter sentence.
That's so right. Yeah, and that's a fundamental sentence. So simple is hard, and hard is simple. That's how our universe works. So like that's how all the physical processes work, just like science and everything else. Like you could explain someone how like an atom and with like all the electrons around are flying and how it works in a simple way. Then how it actually works is like ultra complex. The same with pitching, right? The same with like stories and people understanding. In the end of the day, you produce something very simple and you're like, really? It took me that long to kind of formulate these 3 words? But in the end of the day, it's very complex how you get there. We had a funny, like I was brainstorming. I'll just give a few examples of how it might have been. So it was chat for business, not very working. Digital deal-making environment. Well, it kind of, offers the value
Yeah.
and you kind of understand, but it's like weird. People are just like, what?
Yeah.
With the latest iteration, it was agreement setup and execution platform. And then through like series of like talking and pitching, it kind of shortened down to the agreement platform, where it still kind of makes the same sense without the execution and setup and all of the weird kind of combinations of words. Yeah, and then that's how you should approach all of your talking. So it's very easy to throw more text on a slide. So always easy to throw more text in a paragraph of your kind of pitch script or whatever. And it's always hard to kind of start crossing it off. And you have to be very critical, understand what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, how you could convey it in a simpler and more like eloquent way. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, and we always want to say and we do this and we do this and we do now you've lost everybody. So I say that you are the average of what you say, people. So keep your list short. If you've got 10 features, you should be only mentioning the top 3, because once you get down to we're not harmful to dogs. Okay, what is it? That's what you remember. You don't remember that you're the ultimate ice melter for sidewalks. I don't know.
That's right.
I just had to come up with something that wasn't harmful for dogs there. So everyone talks about hustle. What are you doing to get traction and build your audience?
Talking.
Okay.
So participating in podcasts like this, for example, this is my first, to be honest, it's my first podcast for this specific project. But it's just networking, cold adding people on LinkedIn, staying on top of recent updates with like interesting programs, participating in tech events. For example, we had COVID. I had to improvise a way how to keep networking, keep the traction, keep everything going. We've applied to the Founder Institute program, and it did well off, paid off, because I knew how to drive the car in the end of the day. I like the analogy. So there's a lot of founders who jumped into Founders Institute and then we're like, okay, so what do I do next, right? Like, is success just ultimately granted for me? No, you have to, like, it's like, if you don't know how to, if you don't know how to ride a bicycle, why do you need this Ferrari car, right? So that's how I would kind of place, like, incubators are like more the Ferrari cars in the business world, right? Accelerators are more like Formula One, right? Like, you just like Techstars, Y Combinator, just fly there. Incubators are like a really good Lamborghini or like a Ferrari car. So if you don't know how to drive that and you need like a mama's van or something and you want your lifestyle business, you have to go with that. Or like, if you don't even know how to drive that, you know how to drive a bicycle. Um, and that's what you have to keep doing. And you have to plan exact steps, how the most realistic version of how would you build up traction, reach out to correct people, ask for references, participate in events, participate in these ecosystems. Here in Toronto, it's great. Craig is a massive contributor to it with the folks involved. That's just amazing what they do for the people here. It's all for free. Like, no one is getting charged for all of these networking events, and then they deliver ultimate value in their courses afterwards. There's TechTO for sure, right?
Yep.
There's a bunch of those in US, and you would be amazed if you do kind of start digging and doing your research how like those might be beneficial for you in the mid and the long run. There's this great community called they're built an app called Entre, ENTRE. So it's an app for founders. So like an entrepreneur, right? And their founder, Michael, is amazing. He is very active. He's located in Pittsburgh, if I'm not mistaken, hosting a lot of events, doing master classes, building up that network of founders on their app. Great. We've landed the third place in one of their pitch events actually. So that's how it all started. It was a fun story. We've applied. We got magically chosen out of 156 teams in US. I would assume we were the only Canadian project, and we've landed the third place there before FI, before like preparing everything. But yeah, and that's how you do it. So then from there you keep understanding your customers, their pain points. You are doing stuff that is not scalable. You are trying to solve whatever their pain is, and from there you start systemizing the business, and then you get to the scalability, and then you get to real traction and sales.
So if people want to find out more about Paqt, the agreement platform, where do they go?
They go to pact.chat. We have a mailing list as well, so they could Google me up on LinkedIn, Anatolii, and then my ultimately complex large surname. They could do a bunch of other stuff. They could Google up Paqt chat in YouTube. We have a lot of videos there. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure we put all those links when we post the podcast so everyone can get to it. And if anybody wants any of those links who are here on the call, just message me, leave a message either on TorontoStarts or whatnot. I know St. Ike knows how to get a hold of me. I don't know about the rest of you. But all our information's there. You can join us on Slack. Just go to TorontoStarts.com. You'll see everything. And thank you for taking the time today to talk about Paqt.
Thank you so much, Craig. Yes, for all of the listeners of the Toronto Starts, we'd be able to offer them some free usage for some specific time. So if you just drop us Toronto Starts, if this resonates and might be of good value for you, we'd give you like a half a year of free usage when the product is live, and you'd be able to enjoy it. And we'll be helping you to properly fit it to your business. And
that would be great, and I'll follow up to get some more information so we can share that with our audience and get more people using the app.
Great.
Thank you very much, Anatolii. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Craig. It was an amazing talk. Have a good one as well.